Hey guys, Lauren here from Airguns of Arizona, and today we're going to be looking at some accessories when mounting your scope to your gun. So you've selected your air gun that you want, and you've selected your scope that you want. What now? Where do we go from here? We have a million different options on scope mounts and rails, dovetail, Picatinny, levels. It can be really overwhelming sometimes when you look at all the options out there and you go on a website and you see, okay, there are literally 60 different scope mounts available and you just picked one scope and one gun. So we're gonna make that a little bit simpler for you here today and make sure that this is as easy as possible to understand and to get to your goal that you want to achieve. Let's jump right in. When mounting a scope on your gun, there's a couple of really important things that you have to consider. One of the very first things is it depends on the scope that you selected. It's going to have a certain eye relief. Now, typically that eye relief is between certain ranges, and that means you have to mount it where it's, first of all, the most comfortable for you and where you can see a clear sight picture. Second of all, you have to keep in mind the bell of the scope. So this scope has a 50mm bell on the front end, so you can't mount it too low because then it's physically not going to clear the barrel. And another really important thing to keep in mind, and this applies to 90% of the air guns out there, is keep in mind your magazine height. So this right here is a 30 caliber day state. It has an 8-shot magazine in there, and you can see this magazine sticks out quite a bit, and that's going to be kind of par for the course for most air guns out there. Some of them are more extreme than others. It just depends on the air gun and how it's designed. But you want to clear this magazine and you want to make sure that you can actually use your magazine. First of all, I'm going to be using a set of Sports Match HTO 36Cs. Now this is a medium height dovetail mount and sounds to be the perfect mount for this setup. So let's mount it up and see how this is going to work out. Okay, so there you have it. I've mounted the scope up with the HTO 36Cs from Sports Match, and I'm going to try and just put my magazine in there. We'll see it doesn't fit at all, and I'll come around this side and just show you that that height is just not going to make it. I can even try moving the scope around a little bit. So even if I move the scope a little bit backwards or a little bit forwards and influence my eye relief, I mean, it's not gonna help a bunch. There we go, we can move it all the way back and I can slip that magazine in there so I can make it work, but the eye relief is not gonna be good. And I'll just show you guys, if I take this gun out of the rest here and I hold it up. See, this is not a very comfortable hold. I'm gonna have to move my head quite a bit to get a clear scope picture, and it's at the absolute extreme right there to make it fit. So this is not an ideal situation, and there is ways around it if you find yourself in this situation, but it's not ideal. There are some other products out there that'll be a little bit better suited. That's kind of what I want to get into here today. So these mounts are not high enough, even though they're perfect height here by your barrel. They seem to work pretty good. And that's what's really great about the Dovetail Red Wolf, is it has an adjustable cheek piece. So you can actually get higher mounts, and that's going to facilitate it a little bit better. So let's go ahead and mount it up with some Sports Match HTO 71s and see if that works out a little bit better. Okay, so there we have it. Now we have a set of HTO 71Cs mounted on here, and as we can see, this is a little bit better. My eye relief is much better than what it was previously. You see how I moved it right here. You have the turrets right over the magazine position, and what's really important to note at this point is that here are 2 screws holding the barrel in place on the Red Wolf. I can now access these screws without removing the scope, so that's also a really nice thing. Look at that, the magazine fits perfectly with a bunch of clearance. You can easily take it out and you're not having to carefully place it underneath there. So that fits. My eye relief is much better. My position of my scope and my mounts are still correct. And we can go ahead and mount all sorts of other accessories on here. And there's enough room to mount all of those accessories on here. So let's check out some of these accessories. So if you want to add a little bubble level, this is the Hawk 11mm bubble level. It fits really nicely right on that dovetail rail. And I'm just going to mount it up there and show you guys that it can go right back there. on the rail. That's easy to see from a shooter's perspective. If you're shooting, you can just peep down at it. It doesn't stick out too far. It's not too intrusive. So that is an easy option to use. It fits right on that 11mm dovetail. It's one of the only bubble levels out there that I know of that fits right on an 11mm dovetail. So that is a really nice feature, and I really like this bubble level for that reason. If you don't like to have something on your scope rail and you prefer to have it on your scope, there's a bunch of different options for those as well. We have the BKL level that just swivels out like that. So you can literally move it as you want to with a little thumb screw on here, fold it in and fold it out. Some of the other options, and the reason why I absolutely love Sports Match, is they have SP1, SP3, and SP4 Spirit level kits. Now, all of these level kits replaces screws inside your scope mount. This one replaces the screws on the top. This one goes in the side of an adjustable mount. This one is my favorite. It replaces one screw in there, and I can easily tuck it away or open it back up again, and it's easy to see, easy to read as a shooter, and easy to use. So this is one of my favorite bubble levels. It just, like I said, replaces that one screw inside your Sports Match mount, and another reason why I absolutely love Sports Match mounts. One other thing that I like to do, being a competition shooter, is I love to add a Rowan Engineering side wheel to my scope. Well, you also need a spot for your pointer. So this will just be a little pointer, and you can use this pointer to point at anything you would like. But you still have to mount this on the scope as well. So that's also something to keep in mind when you're positioning your scope inside the scope mounts, is to have space for a pointer or for a level or for anything like that. And you still want to be able to read the pointer. So the pointer position is going to be dictated by where your side wheel ends. So this right here is a 150mm side wheel from Rowan Engineering. If I mount it up right there, well, my pointer is going to have to be all the way back here. So I can't have my scope mount too far back close towards the end of the scope. That's going to get in the way of my pointer right there. This also gives you the ability to mount a camera on the back here of your scope if you're wanting to film through the scope. There's a bunch of options available. I'll get into that in a next video, but it's just worth mentioning that we can also mount a camera to the back here if you're using a Tacticam or an Eagle Vision set. It just easily goes on right here. Keep in mind that you will also need a spot in the bell here if you have some of the other camera mounting systems out there. Okay, next up, I'm gonna go ahead and take all of these goodies off and mount a Picatinny Rail on here and show you how I would use a Picatinny Rail once I mounted all the things up to that. Now, we have a couple of different options when it comes to Picatinny rails. We have a two-piece rail, which will be ideal for this gun as the breech is split like that. It works pretty good. The only thing that I don't absolutely love about a two-piece rail is you have two parts moving independently from each other. So if you're in a situation where, like myself, I travel with my gun quite often, and I go to a lot of different conditions, you know, temperature variations and stuff like that can make these move as well as the scope mounts move, as well as a lot of other facets moving, and it just adds to uncertainty. So personally, if I'm going to go for a rail, I'm going to go for a one-piece molded rail like this. This is our Air Superiority tuned rail, and this one actually has 20 MOA built into it as well. That's another thing worth mentioning, is if you're wanting to shoot a little bit longer range, or you're wanting to tighten up your further distances on your gun. So for instance, in my case, I'm a field target shooter at 12 foot-pounds, and I want to push out that apogee of my trajectory a little bit further. 20 MOA is going to help me do that. So this rail is physically slanted down. That's what 20 MOA built in means. And I'm going to use this right now. So I'm going to mount this up on the gun and show you guys how that looks. It's also worth mentioning that you also have these little adapters. So if you don't want to use a rail, you don't want extra height, but you want to use an extra high mount, something like this, the Eagle Vision IPS 30s, you can always use these Picatinny to Dovetail adapters. They're just little squishy adapters like that. One thing to also keep in mind with these adapters is they're not fixed to the dovetail rail like this is. As you can see, it has quite a number of mounting positions right there. So you might get some imperfections. That's just something to keep in mind when using these little guys. They're perfect for 99% of the use, but if you're gonna be putting your gun in a plane and all that kind of stuff, or picking it up by the scope, this is worth mentioning and keeping an eye on. The one advantage is it is a lighter weight and it's only this small thickness, so it's not gonna add any extra height to your scope. It's not gonna add any extra MOA or anything like that. So if that's something that you do not want, these are ideal for that. And that's how that would look. You've converted this from a Picatinny to a Dovetail, and you haven't added any extra height to the scope or anything like that, whereas this rail will add quite a bit of height to there. So this is also something to keep in mind when you're putting this rail on, to not have extra high scope mounts. Well, at that stage, your scope will be very, very high. So I have mounted the Air Superiority tuned 20 MOA rail on the Red Wolf. One thing that I really do like about it is it does have openings at the top there. So do you see how it has little holes at the top there? So I can access my barrel screws and things like that. So I can actually remove the barrel while the rail is on there. And that's something I really like about the ASP rail. What's also cool is the magazine fits perfectly under there. So it adds the 20 MOA rail without adding unnecessary height to your gun. Now I can move this forward and backwards as I please, but this is really easy to use. On top of all of this, I can then go ahead and use some Sports Match, and these are my favorite. It's Sports Match Picatinny mounts. Now something that I really do love about Picatinny mounts is they have this little thumb screw right here, so I can easily put them on and take them off of the gun, and I can move the scope from gun to gun as much as I please and things like that. So that is really comfortable when using Picatinny mounts like this. The one thing I also really do love about these Sports Match mounts is that they have a very thin bar at the bottom here, so that fits a lot of Picatinny rails. Now a lot of Picatinny rails, especially when you get some Picatinny rails that have not been made completely up to spec, these gaps in here might be a little bit thinner, and so some mounts I have found to struggle to fit on all guns. I've not yet found a gun that these Picatinny Sports Match mounts will not fit on, so that's another thing that I really do love about them. They also have this slit here in the middle, so you can tighten them down very, very good for if you're traveling and stuff like that, that mount does not go loose at all. So let's go ahead and mount the scope up with these mounts onto the gun. Okay, so there you guys have it. I have mounted the scope up onto the Picatinny rail here, and as you can see, the Picatinny rail allows me to mount the scope absolutely anywhere, so I can actually loosen it right here and easily just take the scope off inside the mounts like that and move it all the way back if I wanted to, or move it to a different gun or anything like that. I can move the scope wherever I want it, which is a really great feature about quick detach. For Picatinny, we also have a ton of features. So I also have this Hawk, Weaver, or Picatinny level, which works really great. So you could mount the Hawk level on here. There is still room over here on the Dovetail rail to mount the Dovetail one on there. Again, we can also use our Sports Match mounts in here, which work really, really great. The only reason I really love the Sports Match mount over the Eagle Vision in this specific instance is these Eagle Visions that I have over here are fully adjustable, and so they're very tall. So if I just hold it next to it like that, see how much taller the scope would be if I mounted it up there, and so it would start to get really, really high up there. But if you still wanted to use it, that would be totally fine, because you have an adjustable cheek piece over here. This also gives me the opportunity to add a lot of other accessories to my scope. I can add a torch on to the Picatinny rail. I can add some extra levels if I wanted to. I can add an inclinometer if I wanted to. There are just honestly endless possibilities that you could do once you have a Picatinny rail of this length underneath your scope. Some other accessories is something like your Mtc Sunshade. That just threads onto the end of the scope like that, and that adds a little protection from sun glare. We also have these Mtc scope covers for the Mtc scopes, and they'll thread right into each other. It has that beauty ring over there to lock it down nice and tight, and that you can ensure the scope opens upwards if you want that, or to the side, whichever way you want. The rear one, and this is something I really like, is it has this tiny little window in there. That means you can actually use this window to look through and see your turret, and in some cases, if you don't have your glasses on or something like that, you know, the eyes are getting a little bit old. It becomes really hard to see all of these tiny little numbers, especially also in low light conditions. So you can easily add this scope covers to that. It keeps dust off of the back of your scope, as well as rain or anything like that. There we go, just like that. So you could peep through there and see your numbers up here or on the side, wherever you would want it, if you wanted it to go to the side or on the top, whichever way. And that's a really neat feature of these Mtc scope covers. And there you guys have it. That was a in-depth overview of what goes into selecting and choosing the right mounts, rail, levels, or anything that you might want, and how to mount all of that up onto your gun. Also remember, we here at Airguns of Arizona are experts at this, and this is the part where it really comes into play, where we help you out select the best option for you. In the end of the day, your gun and your scope is basically all your choice for what you need. How it all goes together, we've got that part covered for you. So please check us out on the next one. Remember to hit like and subscribe down below. I'll see you later.